Most people are not in the present moment. We are off into the past, we're off into the future. And as you know, as you just put, our power is in the now. That's where we create, that's where we manifest. I have friends who are teachers who teach meditation to kindergartners. I think, wow, what a powerful tool. I'm seeing what they're doing with these younger people, and it's learning how to use this incredibly powerful mind as the powerful tool that it's designed to be. It's a tool. That's what it is.
Welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I am your humble servant and seafood Taoist Master San Qing. And you know what? I'm not tired of this. You can say, oh my goodness, is seafood going to do this again? Yes, it's Christmas Day. I come down to the tree. And my goodness, look at the universe has brought me this incredible being. I want to welcome to the podcast, Robbie Holz. And she is a world-renowned author in over 45 countries, is a profound and prolific healer for many, many years in this natural-born life, and now spends a lot of her time helping people guide them to their return to remember who they are. And I am so forever grateful to have you on the podcast today. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
This is beautiful. I would like you to start with the audience just by sharing a little bit about yourself leading up to this point.
That's a loaded question, son. Well, let me just say that I almost died twice. You know, I'm a little bit of a slow learner, and I was one of those fast-moving, fast-lane, couldn't get enough accomplished in my mind, to the point where I almost died twice. When I delivered my son back in '85, I ended up contracting hepatitis C from a blood transfusion. It was a rough delivery. So the hepatitis almost killed me. And then the experimental treatment that the doctors put me on, I happen to live in the Seattle area, and they had some of the best medical researchers for hepatitis C at the time. And they put me on cutting edge experimental treatments that almost killed me. So I was left in a place where I couldn't get out of bed for about at least 6 months. The brain damage was so severe at that point, I couldn't figure out how to get water out of a tap. You know, I couldn't recognize that the tube goes back on the toothpaste, and that's how the toothpaste stays in. I mean, it was like a child, really. So I had a very young son at the time, and I was determined to stay alive because I wanted him to remember me, and I wanted to parent him as much as I could, but I felt like he was too little to remember me. So I started to research and do ways. Western medicine had nothing else for me, and they had done tremendous, wonderful things for me, but now their black bag was empty. And so I started to go down this path of natural healing, which was very new to me. And I ended up doing what ended up being what the Aboriginal tribespeople have taught us. But I didn't know that at the time. But I ended up healing myself, curing myself of what the doctors said at that time was incurable, because by that time I had hepatitis C raging throughout my system. I had chronic fatigue syndrome. I had temporary brain damage. It was a long fibromyalgia, right? So I was in pretty bad shape. So I started to get better using these natural healing techniques. And lo and behold, found out later when I met my husband, Gary, this is what the Aboriginal people had taught him on how to heal. So I healed myself of all of those things. And the doctors, you know, especially the medical doctors, were they would test me all the time. I was like a guinea pig for them. And they couldn't believe that I had healed it, because you weren't supposed to be able to heal hepatitis C back then. This was back in '85 that I contracted it. But they would test me, and sure enough, I'd healed myself of it. So that put me on this path of waking people up to how to heal themselves, because it was, you know, I just realized that I survived such incredibly slim odds. I kept surviving the slimmest odds. And I thought, okay, I'm here for a reason. I survived for a reason. I believe it's to help people learn how to heal themselves. And that's what put me on this path, and passionately helping people recognize how they're creating disease and how they can stop creating that disease and how to heal it. and all the parts that play into it. And then the Aboriginal tribes people beautifully, generously gifted their ancient healing techniques to my husband and myself and asked us to take this information out because we didn't understand Western civilization, especially civilization in quotes, understand how healing really works. So that's really what I've been doing since. And honestly, this happened when I was I was 30 when this all happened. I really never thought I'd hit 40. 40 was like a bonus point, and I'm going to be 70 next month. So it's just, I am grateful, and I realize that it's to help other people learn what I didn't know at the time either.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my goodness, it's profound stories like that really trigger a curiosity in someone that potentially may not have originally considered themselves a seeker of something else other than what they perceive as their reality. When you hear profound sort of like supernatural miracle scenarios like the one you just shared. And so you were leaning on and at the time you had no idea they were Aboriginal ancient practices, or your husband sort of validated them. You had downloaded them with your own intuitive sense, or your guides had shared them with you.
Yes.
And he validated.
Because I didn't know him at the time. This was back in the 80s and 90s, and I didn't meet him till 2001. But I think, it was just one of those where people can't really hear you as well unless you've been through it. It's harder to really take your word for, unless you've actually been through what you're teaching. So I needed to go through that, and I almost died twice. So, and then come back and thrive. That's the key, Son, is to not just be living and, disease free, but to be thriving, which I was not in the beginning. I did not know that at the time. Now I know it. So,
yeah. So it's interesting. What would you attribute the state that you get in? Normally within a processes, there's this sort of like a feeling, an energetic feeling that now is the perfect moment, that now is realized as the healing moment, the epiphany, the health, whatever it might be on the menu. How was it presented to you as something that was realized?
Well, I was living what we would characterize as the American dream. I had a really good career. I was raising a little boy in a marriage, and we were building a home. And I was, by outward appearances, very successful. And it took, and this is not uncommon, right? People almost die, or they have serious accidents, or they're diagnosed with cancer, to make them examine their life and say, is this the life that I really want to be living? And realizing what's important. And that what I'm grateful for about, Son, is that what I went through in my early 30s put me on a path of asking questions people don't usually ask until they're quite elderly. They don't ask those questions, like, why am I here? What's my purpose? Is there a soul involved? That sort of thing. I wasn't even examining that because I was too busy with life, right? And so, having survived such slim odds, I started examining those questions. They became passionate questions within me. And I was grateful that I discovered that. It put me on a path in my early 30s that most people don't examine until they're in their last years of life. So my husband, Gary, let me just say this because it kind of coincides with mine. He ended up with multiple sclerosis, and he became in a wheelchair, and he was actually faced with about 6 months left to live, and the doctors had no other recourse for him. And he went into the outback, and the Aboriginal tribes people taught him their healing practices and helped him regain regain feeling in his body and that sort of thing. And the reason I'm saying that is because he realized that it was the MS that even people would look at him and say, my God, you're this successful. At this point, he was a physicist. He was an inventor. He was on magazine covers. He was internationally renowned, but he was a very busy man. And those questions that I was talking about were not even on his radar. And that's why he would tell people the MS was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Just as my almost dying twice was one of the most powerful, but one of the best things that ever happened to me, because it put me on a totally different path. I had to get knocked off that fast lane and into what really matters, the big picture. Why are you here? And if you're here, how can you be of service?
Yeah, that fundamental seeker's ultimate goal, how to be in service of ultimately yourself, which is everybody.
Right.
It's coming to that epiphany, that bright white light, that epic moment of awareness that is realized through an event, right? Normally, I mean, something dramatic takes place, an NDE, an OBE, you wake up, you've got psychic powers, you've got healing powers, some sort of what would be perceived as a mystical version of an esoteric sort of realization of self. That seems like something out of a Hollywood movie, but it's not at all. It's really just you remembering who you are, and they don't have to be perceived as superhuman powers. They're sensory perception that you are tuned into, and there's no looking back once you get a taste of it, and you just need to be able to eat it and cultivate it.
Yeah.
And so did it make a lot more sense to you when your husband explained these things, and then you were like, oh my goodness, it's like so much sense. It's like, I've been using this. I'm just returning to who I am. I've done this like 100 lifetimes in a row, and holy boom, here it is.
I know. Well, it was interesting. Gary, he was a physicist. He was very much into the science of things, very black and white. And if I can't see it, I can't believe it. And that's one of the best things that the Aboriginal tribes people taught him, is that there's a lot of gray that can't be explained or proven, but it still exists. And he came back, and I mean, he was on fire after he came back, because he realized it took me a while to realize. And the Aboriginal people woke him up to these healing gifts that he had. He had these amazing abilities where he could, he became just like the Aboriginal tribes people do, the ones in the outback, the remote ones. He became telepathic. He could see inside bodies. He could communicate with animals and birds. And it was interesting that the ones who were aware that he was communicating to them on a telepathic basis were the autistic people and children. Autistic children they knew there was no filter there for them. So it was very interesting. He came back with these amazing abilities and became more and more aware that there was an angel by his side waiting to communicate to him. And he started being able to see guides and angels. And as he started growing exponentially in his abilities, when I met him in 2001, I would just watch him and be, because I came from a very conservative background, but you see this over and over and over. It's proven to you. And so I just became he opened up my world tremendously. And that's when I started waking up to, there's so much more, as you know, there's so much more than we're aware of. There's so much more. We have so much power available to us if we just tap into it inside,
Yeah. I mean, that brings me to, your realization on a deeper level, this filter that you're using, which we all have, we just need to turn it on, is this sensory perception that could come in all forms. You start with the first 5, you're begging for the 6th sense. I tell you that you can speak, hear, and see words in your mind and go, oops, there's 3 more right there. Hang on a second. Whoa, we're off to the races. You got 8. You're superhuman.
Yeah.
And so, you in my opinion, through this journey of cultivation, that the limit to your senses is your imagination.
Yes.
and
Yes.
really what you get out of that. And then cultivating whatever new wonderment or lens of this consciousness lens that you're in, it becomes more refined if you choose to focus your intention on that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I've observed anyway.
I would agree that mindfulness is very important, and I think that's a big part of the disease and the healing is paying attention to mindfully where your thoughts are creating, and is that a thought that you want to have? Because what I came to understand is that, and it's so common in our culture, negative thoughts have an effect on the physical body.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that you already know this, but I don't think people realize to what extent. And so when you have negative thoughts, and there's nothing wrong with negative thoughts, it's just that you have to become aware of that it can become toxic and it can have some harmful effects on your health. But some of the most harmful emotions to the body are self-hatred and guilt. And I was raised Catholic. Guilt is just our default. And so the reason it's so hard on the body is because it's throughout the whole system and it doesn't leave. Anger, we tend to, that's why you lash out. That's why you kick or hit. It's a way of dispersing the energy. So anger is not as harmful as people would think compared to something like self-hatred or guilt. It just marinates the body in this toxicity. And at some point, the body just crumbles under this emotional toxic weight. Because when you have a negative emotion, you create a different kind of cell. And I'm sure your listeners are also aware of Dr. Emoto's water photography, and how he showed when you have different negative emotions, it's a very discombobulated cell. It's a heavier, denser cell. It blocks the energy. And it's like creating this swampy breeding ground that's perfect for creating disease. And if you do that on a regular basis, you can imagine what you're creating. And if you have, as an example, we tend to hold grief in our lung chest area. And if you're holding a lot of grief here and not releasing it, that's the key, is you have to learn to release it. If you're not releasing it and you have a propensity, a genetic predisposition to breast cancer or heart problems, you are setting yourself up for some potential problems. So the doctors can go in and cut the cancer. They can go in and remove it. They can give you a heart surgery. But if you continue with the guilt, or not the guilt, the grief, you're creating it again. And so the Aboriginal people were teaching us how to create wellness and to sustain it. You have to become aware of what emotions are you having on a regular basis that are harming you, and what creates wellness. And so wellness, the flip side of that is positive emotions. And some of the most powerful emotions are, for healing especially, are forgiveness and gratitude and love, obviously love. So if you start immersing yourself in those kind of emotions, it's like this high frequency, this high vibration. It's like this teeming river. Disease can't sustain in that teeming, thriving river. It creates a different cell. That cell helps. Again, Dr. Emoto showed us, it looks like a beautiful symmetrical snowflake. It's very high functioning. The others were like slacker cells. These are like beautiful high functioning cells that they don't block energy. They don't block oxygen. They don't block, nutrients. Positive, loving emotions create this thriving energy that is creates this vibrancy. And it creates a different cell that holds light and holds a higher frequency and makes it easier to heal. And that's paying attention to, what am I creating on a daily basis? What am I immersing in? And waking up to that and being willing to let go of these things. And, I love that the Aboriginal people taught us how they're like, you guys tend to be very afraid of certain emotions. You're very afraid of having to feel certain things. And they're like, that's the life journey. Feel it, and then let it go. What's next? Whereas we tend to hang on to things, or we try to suppress it. And that again, creates problems.
Oh yeah, I mean, foundationally for a Taoist seeker, potential practitioner, and ultimately the journey, the first thing that we work on, or actually, it's not going to be, I'm not going to use that word. The first thing that we move off the table.
Okay.
It's problematic. It's not, it's just a lens of your perception is the emotional content.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing I remind people of, your emotions don't control you, you control your emotions.
Yes.
Like, whoa, that sounds pretty scary and authoritarian like. No, actually, it's probably going to scare a lot of authoritarians. The idea that you have empowered yourself to realize that you are not a victim, that you have options, that you can create and change the very resonance that you are having a vibration at, and that frequency will be altered by the state that you're in.
Exactly.
And so, the emotional content is the first thing we get off the table, because that's what my dear friend Martin, the Buddhist monk, would say, the dukkha, the distortion. And once you get the distortion off the table, I'm not asking people to virtue signal the idea of removing their personality, taking the shirt off their back, giving their last dollar to the local church, helping homeless people. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about embodying and realizing that the narrative is a narrative that's been created from your very conception all the way up to your birth into this realm. And then it's basically a summary of your life experiences that you have created in a fractal pattern processes that will repeat itself until otherwise noted. So being subject to actuality is problematic from a human being, human condition perspective. Once you realize, you get the heads up that this narrative is optional, the more you resonate higher, the very side effect is universal love, universal acceptance.
Yes.
But there's a resonance to it. At face value, there's, you say tomato, I say tomato. So the initial realization is, my version of love is razor blades and bunny rabbits. Your version is unicorns and rainbows. And so to change that, to resonate at a universal state of this moment, this now, there should be processes. There should be a method. And that's what I love about what you're sharing with the audience is you have embodied, from remembering who you are from past lives, I imagine, embodying this method or processes of healing that it just so happens drew your attention to realize that you're performing ancient Aboriginal practices of healing from a soul level, from a spirit level. And nothing more powerful than that, remembering that you are perfection in the present moment. And so with the books that you've written, and they're in 45 different countries, just for the audience, just in case, and I imagine that's 45 different languages, what has been the most profound sort of like epiphany for, well, I mean, you've probably got thousands of stories, but just a couple that come to mind for you when people are exposed to the way that you see reality, the way that you have healed yourself over your life experiences? What are some of the things that you can come to mind that you've heard of?
Well, we first put out the book. I put out the book, Secrets of Aboriginal Healing. And that talked about my late husband, Gary's journey into the outback in a wheelchair. And it lays out the Aboriginal healing methods. There are 5 steps, which are probably very close to what you were just talking about. And then the next book, and the Aboriginal people asked, this is ancient wisdom. They're healing because they said we really didn't understand how it works. We were excluding the mind and the spirit. It's a body, mind, spirit alignment is what it is. And so they asked us to take this information out into the world. This is information that they have passed on verbally or telepathically from generation to generation. And it's at least 60,000 years old. This is ancient that they've not, I think they've only disclosed it one other time to a Chinaman years ago. And they said that it was time. We needed it. It was also time. So we put it out at their request. And I was really kind of shocked to see it take off. I did not expect that I would be talking to you years later, telling you those books are in 45 countries in a number of different languages. So we put out the second book, Secrets of Aboriginal Secrets of Awakening. And the reason I mention this is because that book was like the second book. When Gary came back from the outback and realized that he now had this knowledge, but he started to wake up to his healing gifts. And there are so many stories in there of people that he has healed. And I find it fascinating who gets better and who doesn't. Because it's exactly what you're talking about. These stories just so impact you. We had people who, let me just tell our listeners this story. When he had a clinic that he opened up, and it was word of mouth. We didn't advertise, it was just people found us. And there was a young couple, and he's a young man. He found out that he had brain tumors and that he was going to live for about 6 more months. He didn't have maybe a year. And his fiance decided, I'm going to marry you anyway. Even if we only have 6 months together, I still want to be together. So they got married. And his new mother-in-law said, I want you to go see this healer, Dr. Holz, my husband. And you could tell by the way they walked in that door, they thought this was a complete waste of their energy, that this is the last place they wanted to be. They didn't believe in it, but they were doing it to appease the mother-in-law. Well, he ended up healing this man completely. In fact, when he walked out the door 20 minutes later, half an hour later, the kid didn't have headaches anymore, which he had headaches for years because he had these brain tumors. So he started coming back to Gary, and it didn't take very many visits, but Gary shrunk the tumors and released, and they were gone. So we always encourage people to go back to the doctor and have tests done so that you can see that those tumors are gone or whatever. And he went back in and had, I don't know if it's an MRI or whatever, and sure enough, they're gone. So, and then you'll have other people who are so committed to healing, who believe in it, heart and soul, and it doesn't work for them. So it becomes then, remember I said it takes the body has to be aligned with healing, the emotions have to be aligned with healing, and the soul needs to be aligned with healing. What I think people often miss is the soul part of it. It was that young man's journey, his soul's intention that he heal. Whereas it was not for the other person. Like we had a little child who was born blind, and Gary was able to help it to some extent. And we talk about that in the book. And to me, they're just, beautiful stories. But it was not that soul's intention for that child to see completely again. So you realize it doesn't have anything to do with you and your healing abilities. You can do everything right, but it's about, does the soul want you to heal? And most of the time, the soul does. Most of the time, the soul wants you to let go of this negativity or whatever is sabotaging your health and let go of this. The body becomes a messenger, letting you know where you are creating problems, because it's very specific where the emotional problems lie. We tend to have fear, and this, it's very, you can just look it up in a book. This is what the emotional cores are. So the soul is telling you, this is your homework. And, people used to come to us with pages and pages of things that they needed to physically wrong with them. And it's like, okay, are you ready now? Are you willing now to let go of these sabotaging thoughts and this lifestyle that doesn't fit, that doesn't create a healthy, toxic, vibrant body? So there's so many of those stories. And I think what people miss is they think it's just, I got to get my body healed and just address the physical part. Or I'm also very happy. Why am I not getting better? Well, have you learned what your soul wants you to learn from this? And that's an important lesson, because sometimes, maybe you need to learn something that you're just really resisting. And it's that resistance it's that resistance, the mind's resistance, that tells us where we're still holding on and need to let go.
Yeah, I mean the profound realization for anyone listening to this is the simplicity. You know, I mean, if you even possibly propose or suggest the idea that all is one, one is all, you are a macro of a micro of all things, which is sort of very fundamental for most indigenous ancient practices, realizing that this is all one and you are one. And the only way to access that is the present moment, right now. That's how it works. And so, you know, the simplicity of that is, if you are the universe, the emotional content creates the distortions or rippling effects within it. Are you creating harmony or disharmony? And what does that really mean? From an ancient Taoist practice, it sounds very similar. Everything has their emotion over virtue within the energy centers. And once you align that, you remove the emotion, you reveal the virtue, and you create synchronicity within the energy architecture, which creates a harmony. So it doesn't have to be as problematic as Mummy didn't give me 2 cookies when I was 5. I didn't get Oreos when I was 7. Dad didn't let me drive a car when I was 12. These are events that you have attuned yourself to and created from a thought, feeling, and emotion, a cluster of these properties that are problematic until otherwise noted. And once you get in a handle of how to, as you would say, clear or remove the energy, remove the emotion, the actual event becomes wisdom. Then it
go. Yeah.
Reflect on it.
I love that. Let go or be dragged. I saw that on a magnet at a friend's house. Let go or be dragged. Is that releasing? The Aboriginals are the ones that I'm referring to are very highly evolved, and they have much to teach us. And they live in a world of simplicity, as you mentioned. They will tell you that our minds tend to complicate even the simplest things. It's not that complicated. I think fear tends to do that, you know, not understanding something. We tend to overcomplicate. And yeah.
I mean, I think my teacher Latsu, who I'm in communication with on a second by second basis, is like my little spiritual blankie. I have we go through our facets of what we call the diamond. Ultimately, the ultimate access of pure source is the monologue, not the dialogue. And of course, I have dialogue with my spiritual teachers to decipher and determine what the ultimate access of that monologue is, being this present moment, that you're not a person or a thing. That realized state is the now. So if you truly are that and you embody that, and that is your truth, and you are perfection manifest, then you're not asking yourself, hey, self, could you, being the universe, could you help me heal something? Because if you are the universe, the present moment, if you think it will be done, any place, person, or thing, energy, frequency, or matter will be altered instantaneously with manifestation, magic healing. Yes, and if you call that number 1-800 under the screen today, right now, for the 29 minutes, you will get a 30% discount on your healing.
And a set of knives. Yes.
Oh, yeah, give us a call. Does that resonate with you? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. I love the way you put that. Yeah, that's funny. It's true.
You know, but I think there's an interesting point that I want to get to, and this is something that I keep reminding people of, because I get a lot of the students and seekers, clients, people that embody this stuff that I share with them. They're either doctors, psychologists, therapists, psychiatrists, physicists, energy healers, light workers, massage therapists, Chinese medicine doctors, acupuncture, I mean, you name it. They all end up back to the same core essence, the true essence of all things, energy, frequency, vibration. When you truly tap into that and you're able to, then it becomes a really profound
Yes.
moment.
Yes.
I think the biggest thing that I keep reminding people of, and even my teachers from 30 years ago, they were not, they had a couple of clicks in this reality, but they were fairly young, 60, 70 years of age. One of my teachers had been channeling for over 60 years, and he was perplexed. All his stuff came up when I channeled Latsu for the first time, like that second, and he literally, he was just like, he was lost. And problematic effects of that, right? He couldn't, he literally was like, why him? Why him and not me? I've been embodying this for 60 years. And truly what happened was 6 months later, I was literally holding his withered body in my arms. He had discovered or determined that he wanted to tap out of this incarnation, and all of a sudden got soberly delusional and didn't remember anything, and basically was diagnosed with brain cancer, and really looking at me as why, and his wife was looking at me at why. And the Jade Emperor was really simple, which is one of my other teachers. He said, you must, when you decide and accept it, you know nothing, you know everything. And you see, people get into this, that charge you got right now. It's like, blammo, we're onto something, we're right there. And it's like, people get so caught up in the identity.
Yeah, exactly.
This is something that is a flawed sort of like experience, because when they get an experience where they're embodied in healing, or they get a glimpse, what we call the glimpse, the chasing the dragon, the spiritual dragon, the glimpse, they get caught up in it, and they want to be the Messiah, the next coming of Jesus, and it comes with the whole healing gig.
Right.
And this is where I find it problematic. So they were a great example of that, because ultimately he passed away 6 months later. Within that, I gave him a reading, and he was a little shocked that I was able to see a lot of things. And he was getting involved with other type of entities that were promising him certain things, but with surrendering other parts of himself. And it was really, as the late dear Bob Monroe would say, a louche scenario. So, there's this element, and if people are not familiar with this idea of louche, is this universal energy that's basically a succubus, an incubus, taking from a collective, which is problematic. But the key to taking from your source energy is emotions. Yeah. And so, it's like, and people are like, oh, that sounds ridiculous. Okay, well, I don't like this term, and quite frankly, I think it's kind of like almost like racist. But let's just use it. Karen. They call this person spiritual Karen, right?
Okay, yeah.
I think it probably is. If I look close, it's probably a racist term. Anyway, Karen comes into the room. In old school OG, me being in this game for 30 years, we call this a psychic vampire. And so they come in, and you're just like, Robbie can understand. She's getting a charge and a chill right now. She knows exactly what I'm saying. It is problematic. And you go about your path on a daily basis as a seeker, and you come across someone and you go, hi, how are you? How's your day? And then you go in your mind, I just made a very big mistake. Because if you're stuck in a state where you're potentially, percolating over what is a duality and what is not, and you're still using emotional content, then you'll be subject to that. And a lot of people are like in this delusional state where I am all powerful, I am all knowing, and I am protected, I am this, I am that. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. So if you're involved or in an environment where you have this Karen energy, this psychic vampire energy, you literally feel your life force being drawn from you within the same second. You ask that question and they go, well, you wouldn't have it. You wouldn't know what I had today and last week. And you're like, oh my goodness, I guess I just checked myself. I was virtue signaling. Now, if you truly embody the selflessness that comes with asking someone how they are, because it's an acknowledgement of really yourself and validating that there's this universal like empathy and this attunement of unconditional love, then it's not going to feel the same way. It's not even going to decides. But this is where there's this delusion. And I'm not fear mongering. I think that Robbie and I are in the same sort of mindset, that you need to cultivate a very, very structured, fortified method that you use. And it doesn't come from fear, but it comes from a regulating sort of like ecosystem within this physicality, an energetic ecosystem that can be repeatable, that can be maintained, and then you can use it so you continue as a conscious seeker of this spiritual consciousness and not a victim to it. Because if you look at the life of a healer, and I find it very interesting, because through your own admission, you said, I used to do all these healings all the time. Now I teach people how to do it. Potentially, I'm getting an idea that maybe this is the perfect point to hand the baton and not be that center point of taking. Because a lot of healers don't get there. They end up just dying. They don't realize it. It's like, oh, well, I just handed out my very precious life force because I was delusional. I wasn't tapping in.
Yeah.
And it's a mass thing. When you get to the level that you're at and you're sharing this with the world, this is problematic if not addressed for many people when they come into healing spaces. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's important to empower people. Because I think quite often we are apt to turn our power over to other people, doctors, experts, even healers. And it's about recognizing the power really lies within you, and what feels right intuitively to you, no matter what this person is doing or saying. And that's one of the things that I had to do when I was going down this path of healing myself, is recognizing that doctors were giving me, and other people were giving me, their best advice. But if it didn't resonate, if it didn't feel right intuitively, to let it go and to do what felt right to me. And so one of the Aboriginal of the 5 steps that the Aboriginals have given us on healing, the 4th step is empowerment. Take your power back. Just because you have what they have diagnosed as an incurable disease doesn't mean that you cannot heal that. Like you were talking about earlier. So that's very important, to take your power back. And you were talking about this earlier, how we have this within us. Everybody has it. It's just that some of us have developed that muscle a little bit better than others. One of the first things I had to learn as a healer from my guide was, just because you know how to help that person, you know how to help them heal, doesn't mean it's your job to do that if they haven't asked you. And that, they're on their own journey, going through what they need to go through, and it may not be time for them to heal yet, and that there's nothing wrong with what they're going through. They have mentioned that, my guides have mentioned this a number of times. Pain is a very powerful teacher. It's so effective. And they've said there's nothing wrong with pain. It's a real effective tool to move people in a certain direction, whether it's letting go of certain things, releasing certain emotions, certain perspectives, certain distortions, like you talked about earlier, or finally changing the way you see things. I tell the people, so it's not unusual for people to tell me, okay, I know my mind's creating problems. I know my mind is sabotaging, but I don't know how to change that. I don't know how to switch it. And I know I need to be thinking differently, but I can't seem to do that. My mind is often my worst enemy. And it is quite often this incessant thinking that we have in our culture really is kind of a bit of a disease. So I tell them the story about how my dog, Checkers, true story, my dog Checkers always wants to be involved in everything. He's always in the middle of everything. And sometimes he's making it worse by this dog being in the middle of something. And one time we had a tree fall through the ceiling of our home, and we need to have the bedroom repaired. And the Checkers is in the middle of this bedroom with all the workers, thinking that he's helping. And he's just not. He's making things worse. So we call that Checkers helping, when you think you're helping, but you're making it worse. Somebody takes your dishes away before you're done eating. So what I tell people is, what we did with Checkers is we had to reassign him. We had to put him by the front door and let him alert us to when the workers showed up, because he's a very good guard dog, and he knows he's good at it, and he likes doing it. But we needed to assign him to get him out of that bedroom and at the front door doing something that was effective. So what you want to do is to start more consciously reassigning your mind when it's checkers helping. Give it a job. It wants to be involved, but give it a job of maybe finding the gratitude in this. Maybe finding, what's the lesson here? Why is this on my path? Why does this keep coming up on my path? And so reassign that job to start examining things, but from a more loving angle than from a fear-based, because it's either fear-based or it's love-based. And this is another story that it's true, but I had a problem. My mind had a problem with smokers because I lost a very dear family member to smoking. And I got really upset because a lot of my family members were still continuing to smoke. So I found myself just really resistant and blocking that energy we were talking about earlier at these people who were smoking. And I got really upset with the tobacco companies who were putting out this deadly, toxic, product. And so what happened to me was I kept finding myself surrounded by smokers. Couldn't seem to get away from them. They just kept showing up, and I just kept being surrounded by smokers. And when I finally realized, okay, it keeps coming up in my path for a reason. It's here to teach me acceptance. I may not like it, but this is what they're choosing to do on their journey. And so when I let go of that, at least be neutral, rather than, you may not be able to embrace it, but at least accept they're learning what happens when you don't nurture the body or listen to it. When I accepted that and stopped getting hung up and triggered by it, the smokers went away because I didn't need it anymore. I got it. It was like a lesson that I had learned. So I could check that one off and move on. Like the Aboriginals say, okay, now what? What's next? Right? And I think, and I would suspect that you've done this because you've been on this path for a while and you have become very skilled at it. You find where your mind is getting stuck. And usually we have expectations, and especially the more we love them and the closer to them, the greater those expectations often are. We don't have acceptance. Those are the two biggies, the expectations and non-acceptance, judging, right? And when you finally let go of that and realize everybody's learning something different, everybody's learning and moving at their own pace. And my job, where I come from should be love, compassion, empathy, acceptance, non-judgment. And my body, my emotions, because the body and emotions are so intertwined, you cannot separate them. The emotions are showing you where you're getting stuck. And if you keep ignoring it, then the body will show you where the emotions are getting stuck. And so that's what you have to realize. That's what Gary realized when he had MS and went into the outback in a wheelchair. The Aboriginal tribespeople taught him. He had a very abusive father, an alcoholic, abusive father who used to beat him. And Gary was this brilliant man, and he got really good at numbing himself emotionally to the point where he numbed himself physically. And he had to go back, and the Aboriginal people taught him very quickly, when you start going back and forgiving and recognizing your father was here to teach you. He was here to teach you many things. You didn't like the way it was taught to you, but he was here to teach you. And when you can forgive him for what he did and the role that he played, but he was here to teach you some major lessons. And our most powerful teachers are the ones that are usually a family member. It's quite painful, but they are master teachers you're here for a reason with them. So that's why you ask the question, why is this here? Why does it keep triggering my mind? Where am I getting stuck? Because eventually it will create physical problems.
The self-evident result of victimhood.
Yeah.
It's realized the old expression that proof is in the pudding.
Yeah.
And that becomes a palpable, tangible 3D reality. And even though people don't, it's like, well, Jifu, you always talk about the 3 to 5 dimension. What happened to the fourth one? Well, you are in the fourth dimension. You cannot observe the third dimension if you are in the third dimension. This is like sort of like an observer a seeker, you're already right there. You're tipping your toe into the possibility. And so you're even closer than you even imagine. And the limitations are zero. But first and foremost, you have to get past this superficial, cheap facsimile of reality as your human expression.
Yes.
And it's not to be erased. It's just to be realized that, I like to take my personality on and off like underwear. So, hey, guess what? You know what? I like Netflix, chocolate, ice cream, and driving my side by side in the desert at 100 miles an hour. Guess what? That doesn't have to negate this present moment, because the present moment, I'm not a place person or a thing. There is nothing. And that's how you acquire that. And so that fabric is quite self-evident, with the levels of consciousness and the way that we develop it within Taoism. You literally, your what you would perceive as your mind is a blank slate. And it's void, it's darkness. And so when things present themselves, they're very specific for whatever it is that's happening right now, whether it's a spirit entity, whether it's an actual moment for healing, whatever it is. And so we are literally, you become the default as consciousness 24/7, and you're able to be completely this present moment. And so that means that, like, for example, if you're attempting to conjure up from your personality a thought that would be problematic, whether it's a person, place, or thing, you are unable to conjure that image. It will burn up like fire, like as if someone lights it and it dissolves into phosphorus, golden, like amber light. And so it's sort of part of the effects of this type of level of clear sense that is developed. And it's part of the journey. And so when you become attuned to that, we have experiences like the one we're having now. I'm operating all dimensions at once. Well, what does that mean, Jeffrey? Well, I'm as high as a kite flying through the universe. I'm merging through planets, constellations, having visceral kinesthetic experiences as we speak, because that is my reality. What you would consider a DMT experience, a psychonaut, 30 minutes of bliss, is my reality at will, because I conjure this stuff up. I am creating, I am developing the skill to master the energy, to move through, and I want to stimulate more DMT. I want to stimulate more nitric oxide. I want to stimulate and produce oxytocin. That is the possibility when you are the present moment. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's an excellent point. I think it's not, I would imagine it's different with your listeners, but most people are not in the present moment. We are off into the past. We're off into the future. And as you just put, our power is in the now. That's where we create. That's where we manifest. It's just not something. It's interesting, I think, down the road, generations down the road, because I have tremendous hope that we are moving in the right direction. It may not seem like it, but I think underlying it's happening. I think that they will start teaching people, young kids, how to be more present, how to, I have friends who are teachers who teach meditation to kindergartners. I think, wow, what a powerful tool. I'm seeing what they're doing with these younger people, and it's learning how to use this incredibly powerful mind as the powerful tool that it's designed to be. It's a tool. That's what it is. And so I think that was very well put, what you said. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a father of 6 myself. My eldest is 12. My youngest is 5 months. And the last 5, 12, 10, 8, 5, and 3 are all immersed in the present moment. The 41st of them were things like hypnosis, remote viewing, psychic capabilities, energetics, energetic cultivation. This is stuff that is there daily.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
It does present a bit of a problem sometimes when daddy has story time because they know I'm cheating. So when I come, they're like, no, story time. Oh, really? Dad's going to do story time. Listen to my voice, take a deep breath in, and sleep. Good night. Okay. Anyway, get back to Netflix. And
Yeah.
people, they get irritated, but this is a synchronicity thing. So what happens is when you're drawing and you literally are on conscious sort of state of resonance, and you're resonating and transmitting this moment now, the possibilities are endless.
It is
So
endless.
in a scenario like what I was talking about, is story time is first and foremost, I synchronize with the respiration of the youngest. And then when that is embodied, I embody that. I then move through the cycle, connecting all of their energy bodies, and that then sinks into their physical body.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
Replicate the respiration, and I just tune it in a little bit more with a little bit more theta, and all of a sudden, boom! Oh, good night.
Yeah, that's cool.
You know, I mean, but that's energy. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And so when you're getting large levels, I think the most I've ever had was 1,000 people physically for a healing. People come in, and they come in with the intention, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, they have things they want healed. And when you have a collective like that, oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful.
Sea of energy.
Yeah.
And, you replicate that as a collective, as a singular, more in the terminology of a new age language called quantum physics or something of that nature. I just go old school, Taoist, ancient, 1,000-year-old practices of the Wu Ji, or more commonly within a Taoist path, we call it the Wu Wei. Effortless action, effortless effort is what.
I like that.
So, a lot of people, they're very much this new age manifestation, like, movement that's going on across social media. You can manifest anything. You could do anything. I think it's fantastic. I think there's a little bit of a problematic misdirection there, because this is why most people read The Secret and get very disappointed with the outcome, because the one secret that they didn't reveal was you are not separate. So when you ask someone, reveal the values, your values, you're missing the point of the whole thing.
I know. I would agree with you on that 100%. Yeah. I also think that what they've missed with the other thing they didn't reveal in The Secret is what's your soul's intention. I mean, we're souls. And if your soul doesn't intend for you to be a millionaire, it doesn't matter how many vision boards you put together and, how much you work on that. It's the soul. It's interesting, isn't it, that the soul is not brought up, whether it's healing or it's manifesting. And I think we need to recognize we are souls that have an agenda, that have things we want to master and evolve and expand. And we are this collective, this beautiful collective. But and maybe that in the past we haven't been equipped to have all the pieces, but now we're starting to get all the pieces. So it does change anything. And like your program, you're giving a lot of beautiful information, powerful stuff to people, and people that will find you when they're ready for it. So, yeah.
I mean, it is sort of like an interesting insight. So I spent many decades working with thousands of people, and then I got to a certain point where I wanted to reach millions of people. That's where I sort of embarked on social media as my teachers laid out the framework. He gave me the directive of what I needed to do. And I've been in the social media game for about a year. And, it's an interesting space to be in. I mean, I've been in podcasting for about 9 months. I've got over 400 episodes, and I don't stop.
Wow.
People look at me. Well, I do anywhere between 3 and 5 guests a day podcasting. And they're normally between 2 and 3 hours. And then that's including my own. And so people look at me like there's either people that go, wow, that's amazing, or then there's this competitive seed in some of these. And this is definitely from the podcast hosts. They get all weird. They get super weird. They're like, hang on, what? And like they're looking at the way that I'm embodying this, and they've worked at this for 15 years. And I'm like, I'm achieving things that's taken them over a decade to do in months, only because everything is abundant, timeless, endless, limitless, infinite. I don't get tired and exhausted because I'm attuning myself to the present moment. I'm not being, oh my goodness, it's another. I can sit here. The longest podcast I think I gave you the emission of 7.5
I know,
hours,
which is,
and it felt like a walk in the park because it's the now.
I was just going to say, because you were so present. Yeah.
Right. And you don't get exhausted when you're tapping into the now.
Yeah.
When you are the now. It is this,
cool.
and so it doesn't have anything to do with me, yet the embodiment of this stuff is. So when I developed, I sort of went down that path, and I was like, you know what? It's probably, I need to change my way. At one point, I was literally doing sort of things for very affluent people with blank checks, and it was making no sense to me. I was looking at my teachers going, why am I here? I feel like a monkey in a grinder. I'm sitting in front of a Fortune 500 CEO asking me to do readings on his upper management. And they're like looking at me like, what is this guy doing here? And I'm like, no, this has to stop. And I looked at my teachers. I went, I think I've lost my way for a minute here. This is not the way you tap into this stuff. This is not being used for the betterment and the higher ascension of all as a conscious awakening, a conscious awareness, a remembering. So I pivoted from that, and I wanted millions. It's time to do millions. And so, you kind of get this sort of point where I developed an app, and this app is really powerful. It's a digital offering that literally is imprinted to affect you visually or audibly, giving you a kinesthetic response instantaneously. Like literally, this is not like a meditation app, which people, oh yeah, it's a meditation app. No, this is an experience. This is a developmental skill that you walk away with as a mastery of yourself. So when people use it, there's two things that happen, because they always start with the subject of duality. They either love it or they go, this is driving me nuts, because they're so immersed in the personality and the beta frequency of the humanist that it's requiring you to remember. And that will, like when someone goes, it's so slow, I'm like, it's not slow enough. If you think something's slow, you go even slower. It's like the slowest of the slow, because this is the present moment. It's not this perceived human experience of 1,000 miles an hour, and you're running the wheels and you're burning the candle at two ends. This is the human condition. And so this app, people use it. They use it for a couple of weeks, a month, 2 months, and they're literally empowering themselves because they have complete control of their emotional state. And now they can actually get on with the true point that the Jade Emperor reminds people of: remind the man mortality is real. That this is so powerful. The precious moment, this gift of this 4D, is that you're still embodying that. So within a Taoist seeker path, we embody the immortality perspective. So you enrich this physicality so it extends the reincarnation to the optimal, so that you can gather this awareness and this consciousness, so it will be for the collective, for humanity, and then, of course, for your next level up.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful.
And it's really important. I mean, a lot of people have this Hollywood version, and you and I understand that. It's like, I'm a good person. Okay, stop now. The second they have to identify with the idea they're a good person, we need to help you remember. You don't have to keep attempting to sell someone else on the idea of who you are, because you don't believe it yourself.
Yeah.
You don't believe it. And so let's help you remember, so you're not continually attempting to patch up this very, very, very flawed sort of version of what you think you are. You want to perceive it. It's like, and that came back to one of my teachers that passed away. It was a deluded state.
Yeah.
And a lot of people get caught up in that, and they really allow themselves to be present, to be this moment, to be whole. And of course, then they're subject to this morphing, this manipulation, this control. And, it can be
very vulnerable to it. Yes.
right. And then that we identify with how you spoke very this beautiful attention to the soul, and that that the humanness is, it's like Lao-Tzu, my teacher. At the beginning of the year, a lot of people were like, oh, what is he saying? Everyone's telling me it's brimstone and fire coming out of the sky, the financial system, everything's going to deploy, World War III, all the rest of it. And when he got on the mic, he's transmitting from me. He's simplistic. He's quite cheeky, actually. He was like,
I love that when they're cheeky like that.
I know. It's like, imagine you're a grain of sand. Imagine you're a grain of sand asking the beach, what are we doing today? Fall back into the beach and be real. And I just went, I can't make this stuff up.
Yeah.
I can't make this up. And this is sort of my daily entertainment, really, being an observer of this profound stuff, because I will remind you, I know nothing. I am not a holder of anything. I'm just a catalyst and a receiver for a state of consciousness that will give you the epiphany. And that kinesthetic charge that you and I had is the validation. That's when you go, guess what? Okay, it's real to me. I don't need you to tell me. I know. Mm-hmm. And, sometimes when I have channels on and incredible intuitives and mediums like yourself, when I'm telling stories about healing, like witnessing physical flesh return back to, and they go, you're telling the truth. Yes, I am telling the truth. This is the usual. Yes, I think I'm a little bit of a spiritual brat or something. The manifestation miracle of healing was just something that I've been doing for thousands of lives.
Yeah,
and it presents itself, and it's not a better or worse scenario. It just is this present moment. So when I do like what I call black op drive-by psychic readings, where I'm in Vegas because I'm down in Nevada. So our family day will be street magic. Let's go down to the strip. Everyone's having a good time, and you get all these groups of people, and they're all, I'm so excited to be here. It's Vegas, whatever. Well, on the strip, there are tons of entertainers that are just lined up and down the Vegas strip, right?
Yeah.
We'll go up to a group of people that are just having a good time, and I'll be like, would you like to experience bliss right now? And they're like, yes. And so their friend will get a camera out. It's like this YouTube moment. They're gonna record the whole thing. And the same second they say yes, I go, sleep. And their friend is passed out, standing up, and their friends go, oh, what happened? And it's that present moment. People need to realize the entry level to consciousness, even from something as simplistic as hypnosis, which people dismiss. You have the ability to realize how focused you are. And so all of a sudden, their friend is standing up, passed out, and their friend's videotaping this thing after that. Of course, I got their permission. And it's like, okay, what do you think? And I look at them. It's like, so what is it? What's on the menu? How about we erase their name? I'm Justin Bieber. And guess what? I'll take their wallet and keys, and I'll have them forget that I even have them in my hands. And they're like, so they're recording this stuff. And I'm like, okay. And they're awake. So where are you? Are you missing your wallet and keys? And I'm waving it in front of them. And they're like, you know what? Do you know where they are? And then the next stage is, so what is your name, by the way? Nice to meet you. And they're like, and their friends.
Yeah.
Holy moly, this is really happening. Then next minute, the next stage is, it's Justin Bieber. Oh my goodness. And of course, I look like Justin Bieber, right? I look like Justin Bieber. And I think this is an experiment that I really want people to understand. And of course, I'm out of that state, very gently massaged back into this present moment. But what I want, that when using tools like that, which I think are really important, that fundamentally everyone should understand how quickly you can get into a state.
Yeah.
Now, this is not what that Robbie and I are talking about. When you talk about spirit energies and entities, and that's a whole different category. This is just an entry level for someone that wants to, you want to take charge of yourself. This is always good to have an understanding how quickly you can get into a different state. And I think most people don't understand how quickly that is, how quickly they could change their life and for a present moment and a betterment in relation to accessing 100% consciousness.
Yeah.
So when you do that from a neurological, anatomical perspective, if you want to look at it as a psychologist, you're accessing different states of awareness, brain waves. So now you're getting into if you're 100% conscious, then you're accessing alpha, theta, delta, epsilon, gamma. And so when you're able to do that, you can change your life. So the trauma that you thought was such a big deal, and I always walk away from people with that type of event. I'm like, what would you like to acquire from this interaction? Oh, well, I'd like self-confidence. I was afraid of bees. I've done. And they literally feel superhuman when they walk away. And in most cases, I get an email or a text later in the week going, I was with my friend who's a beekeeper, and I just literally stood there, and I didn't have any fear of bees, and I've had this problem for 20 years because this is how easy it is.
Yeah.
This is what we're talking about, and it really comes down to embodying that. And again, what Robbie said about the soul, about getting to understanding what it is that is the purpose of the nature of reality for you, you, not for John Smith or Roger Moore or whoever it is that you seem to feel like you hold that candle. And I think that most people lose sight of that. They lose sight of themselves, and they spend most of their time caught up in, I hate to use sort of like 3-letter organizations, but a psyop that's been fabricated for them to be disconnected.
Yeah.
Because this is sort of like a big thing. Through Chinese history, Taoists were always the advisor to the emperor because we had the metaphysical aspect and the insight to access things, i.e. magic, and do weather magic, plant magic, animal magic, all types of magic. And the advisors to the emperor were very, very well sought after until the emperor decides we can't possibly have people empower themselves. Off with his head. So through human history, in that understanding, and quite frankly, it's been quite evident in the history of mankind in the last 100 years that there has been an attempt to erase the very ancient indigenous practices that I teach people in the landscape of Chinese history, which is really quite shameful, and it's just heinous. It's beyond words. Any dictator that can erase 60 million of their people, and we don't hear, and that's right. And so you have a timeline of human history where there are millions of people that have been slaughtered due to the hands of megalomaniacs over human history in the last 100 years. That is it's unfathomable, but it's still going on. And so I think that's just really crazy. And so, it's beautiful when you mentioned, your husband said that he went to Australia. Did you ever go to Australia?
I did. I went to Australia, and I was, it kind of reminds me of what you were just talking about. Being with I went to Australia, and I participated in healing ceremonies with Aboriginal women. I was invited to come from the United States. There were about a dozen women who were not Aboriginal tribes people, and they opened up their ceremonies for the first time. And I was one of the people that got to be there. And I can't talk about what happened other than, the actual ceremonies themselves, but we were doing things that were so powerful. People would call it magic. We were conjuring up thunderstorms that were powerful that they had not seen in that area for a long, long time, doing all kinds of things that may seem that you just can't even do that, but not in the world that you and I are very well aware of. It's not magic. It's just we are these limitless beings that have these abilities that once you start tapping into that, it's limitless. And they opened my eyes. It was beautiful when I was with them in these ceremonies. I could feel you know how there's no duality. You could feel we were all one. You could feel this tremendous, it's almost like we just melded into each other, you know, the dragonfly into the clouds, into the trees, into the, you know, and to not just know it, but to actually feel it was pretty cool. And also to feel what another thing that I felt when I was doing these ceremonies is, and talk about being in the present, being in the now. That's exactly the way these tribes women live, the remote ones. It's not like we're doing this at 5. It's like, no, we're doing it when, you know, the energy is right. But I also felt tremendous love from Gaia, Mother Earth. I mean, I knew that she loved us. I knew that she had this passion for us, but I actually got to feel that to the point where you're just weeping from the love that you're feeling that she has for we human children, so to speak. So it was it was pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, it's so powerful, the ritual. I mean, weather magic's a huge thing. Thunder magic for Taoists is really potent stuff. It's sort of like a gateway to the alchemical processes.
Yes.
Start to really play with the water, the mercury. You start using the very essence of all these planets that are inside of you that are literally like mirrored effects of the universe. So when you access that fluidity, the crystallized purity of metals are, you know, just perfection.
Yeah, and I love the word that you used, that fluidity. That's a beautiful description. Yeah.
And, you know, there's nothing more now than an indigenous ancient practice that is self-evident.
Yeah.
As you said, you know, you experienced this whole somatic, visceral sort of thing where it's just all things. It's all embodying, and sound is an incredible gateway to that.
Yeah, it was very deep levels. And I mean, it's something that'll never leave you. I'm sure you've had those experiences where I remember feeling tremendous. When Gary, my husband, passed, we knew he was going to be passing, and he sure enough did. But I didn't know that he would be coming to me after he passed. He'd show up at 8:00 in the morning, 8:00 every day. That was unexpected. But I went on a camping trip by the ocean. I live in Washington State, and I decided to go down by the ocean and stay in a yurt for a couple of days just to really connect, you know, with nature again. And Gary had passed recently, and what he helped me experience on that trip after he had passed was this love. It was so deep. And I knew I'd never experienced anything like that. It was just, I was sitting on top of this sand dune, and as the sun was going down, people were starting to leave the beach. They were flying kites and playing in the water, and they were starting to funnel through these sand dunes to go back to their cars. And I felt this outpouring of love for them as they're just coming back, leaving for the day. And I knew that what I was feeling was, it kind of was mind-blowing. It was so much love, but I knew that it was just a tiny, tiny fracture of the love, fractal really, of the love that's available to all of us, that's there, if we can tap into it. And I took a picture of that beach, and I have it not right here by my desk, because I never wanted to forget that feeling and remembering who we are, and that we are this love. And it's it changed my life. That was again, like the Aboriginal tribes people, opening me up to levels that I had not been able to experience before. So it was pretty cool. Yeah. And I think if people are aware of that, if they are aware that we're not alone, if they are aware who they really are, if they are aware how loved we are, it would change things. You know, it would change things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's no question about it. It's a realization that is, there are no words, even though, you know, gateways of, you know, letters, words, numbers, symbols, from a new language, new age perspective, they would gather insight into sort of the genome epigenetic perception of reality, and it's just an understanding where the human being gets caught up in deciphering what the present moment is instead of being now.
Yeah.
Why? It's just when you're now, you don't have. There are no words. There's no need.
Yeah.
You are that tuning fork. You are this present moment, and it's self-evident. There is no need for the details or the semantics of what I need to understand this. And of course, the more you attempt to understand it, the more separate you become from that. I always remind people, when someone comes to you with an absolute anything that is problematic, because there are so many variables to the million ways you can get up the mountain, and that just through the cross-sectioning of your realization, the indigenous and Aboriginal practices, the indigenous Taoist practices, they all come to this remembrance, the present moment, and how they get there is the seeker's cultivation, and they will know when they're there because it will be self-evident.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been a very amazing, magical conversation with you today, my friend.
I've enjoyed it very, very much. Very much. You're a fascinating guy. I have a feeling could go on with wisdom that would open people up you could just keep doing this. This is your path. This is clearly your path.
Yeah. Well, if I leave the shingle out, my teachers do end up like, remember, I'm like, okay, remember you are not the good old one where Jade Emperor always reminds me, when you believe you are not of this body, what can harm you?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so you don't need sustenance right now. Energy is enough. So we'll just keep having you transcribe everything we say. And I could go for weeks.
Yeah.
If I don't stop them, they're like, here's more. You want more? I'll give you more. And there'll be more, and there'll be more. And it just becomes so profound. Like when I transcribed the Tao Te Ching from Lao Tzu just recently, it was like literally someone's life's work that would have taken them years. It was given to me within hours.
Yeah.
And as fast as I could transcribe it was as
wow.
fast. I realized when you read it, it's not a reading, it's an experience that blows your mind, and you're just like, I can't make this stuff up.
No, you can't make that stuff up. No.
And when you're there, as you and I understand, it truly is. I'm just so grateful for every second of every minute that I get to observe.
Me too. And I'm so grateful to have met you. And thank you again for the work that you do.
I want to thank you.
Really needed.
Yeah,
you're very welcome.
And I want the audience to go out and find your social media. I'm going to put all of it under this podcast, where they can find you, your books. Do you offer courses 101 or anything? I know
there's courses. Yeah, there's courses. I no longer do the one-on-ones, but there's a lot of information that I put up on my website, holzwellness.com. That's free. I try to, like you, get this information out there to help people. So there's a lot of information. There's 4 books. There's course, an online healing course. We try to make it really reasonable and accessible. Like I said, a lot of it's free. So it's holzwellness.com, HOLZ wellness.com. And just get this information out there. It was very kind of the Aboriginals to give us this information. And so I am grateful to get it out there, and feel very fortunate to have that experience in my life. So.
Yes. Well, I want people to go out, the OGs, my students, the audience, the subscribers, go and take a look at all the incredible offerings that Robbie has, and look deeper into the Aboriginal healing system that she offers and apply it. And, it's so incredibly powerful, just sampling the frequency gets me as high as a kite. So I just I'm a little bit of a cheater. I do that quite often. I'm always in there.
I know that. I've learned that about you in this short time. Yeah, I like that. I like that.
One of my students is like, Jufu, you're aura dipping again. Yeah, it is
Well,
problematic.
why not, right? Why not?
Why not? So we're all is one, one is all,
Yeah.
So I want to
All right,
thank
my friend. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. I want to thank you. I want to thank the universe for bringing you into my life. I want to thank the audience for sharing their time with us. And I am your humble servant and seafood, Taoist Master San Qing. And I'll see you in the next one, guys.